questions. Take it away, Maggie.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie. I'm an illustrator, like Ivy just said. We're just going to go through the nitty-gritty of all the essential tools that I feel like are very important for costume designers and in general. And so it's going to go by kind of fast, but it is, like Ivy said, it's recorded, so you can refer back to it. And I also sent out a keyboard shortcuts to everyone so that you can refer back to the video and like refer to the shortcuts later. And then if you guys can wait, like Ivy said, to wait for the questions at the very end, because there's a lot to cover and I want to make sure that everyone at least learns all the basics of Photoshop so that you guys can start making mood boards like this. And yeah, so we're gonna get started. Right now, I'm gonna go through the tools really quickly. I know that it might fly right by you, and that's okay. It's gonna make a lot more sense once we start the exercise. But this is basically the mood board that we'll be creating today, and it kind of encompasses like everything that, that you'll probably need for the future. So I'm gonna go through the toolbars on the left side over here. I know it's a little bit small, but if you refer back to your Photoshop, you'll see some of the tools might be in different orders according to your Photoshop version. So I have Photoshop 2019. Some of the tools might not actually be there as well for older Photoshop versions, just because they made a huge upgrade and everything. So here we go. So the very first tool is called the Move tool, and basically allows you to move any layer. For example, you can move this anywhere you want. And then there's three tools for you here down that are selection tools. And these basically highlight whatever item that you need to, for example, you can highlight the crown and then you can copy and paste it and you can move that around. So like I said, we're not gonna go into detail about all these right now because we're gonna have an exercise afterwards to explain everything in more detail. So there's a rectangular selection tool and there's elliptical selection tool. These are probably the two that I use the most. And then the tool on the bottom is the magnetic lasso tool, or the lasso tool. There's three different things that you can do with it, and it's just dependent on how you want to select, how detailed you want to select the items or the layers. And then here's a quick selection tool and the magic wand tool. These are for just like if you have a plain white background and like a black dress and you can easily quickly select it. That's what that's for. This is the crop tool, and this crops the entire image. So that's something to keep in mind. If you just want to change the size of a layer on the board, then you don't want to use this tool. You want to resize it instead to fit your board. But this is only if you want to resize it or like crop it to fit like an Instagram post or something, then you would use the crop tool. This is the frame tool, and it's very, very useful, but I don't think it's in older Photoshop versions. So I would just ignore it. We're actually not gonna go into it just because I think a lot of people have older Photoshop versions as well. And they work just as fine. You don't really need it. The eyedropper tool is to pick colors. You see how wherever I pick, the color down here changes. It's to basically pick out the color from each, from the image and everything. We have the patch tool, which is to basically take out blemishes or whatever that's, that you don't want in the photo. And then we'll go into detail about those later. And then we have the brush tool, which is used for just painting over things. We have the clone tool, which is very similar to the patch and healing brush tool, but you don't really need to know that. History brush tool, you don't need to know that. And some of these things I'm gonna say that we don't need for the sake of the essentials of Photoshop because it's not really necessary. So I'm just gonna kind of like glide over it. And so here's the eraser tool, which is very important. You can like erase any part of a layer, and that's what it is. We have the paint bucket tool, which pretty much paints over an entire image. We have the smudge tool, blur tool, and sharpen tool, which you probably won't really need to use for the most part, unless if you're color correcting, or I mean, if you're correcting photos or anything like that. And here we have the dodge, burn, and sponge tool. These are also things that we're not going to get into because it's a little bit more advanced. And this is the vector tool, which is also very advanced, and we're not going to get into that. But the text tool is very important. That's how you're going to add text to all your images and all your files that you create. And there's different ways to add the text here if you right click. We have another selection tool, which you don't need to know. The next tool is actually, it's a vector tool, but you can make squares, rectangles, anything. And you can basically, the great thing about vectors is that you can blow it up to whatever size and it will never lose resolution. So that is the beauty of vectors. We're not going to get too much into it, but we will use this tool later in the exercise. Hand tool, you can disregard. The zoom tool is important just in case you need to like zoom in to an image like that, or zoom out of an image. You just want to get the details, especially when you're trying to select things and then deselect items in order to get like the detail. And this is where when you pick a color, it'll show you like what color you have picked, and then we'll get more into detail with that. But everything else here on the toolbar, we'll go into more detail again. I'm just gonna fly by it so you have a general idea. I know it's gonna be a lot and it's like, blah, too much. So now we're gonna go through all the different tabs. I'm not gonna go through everything again. So this is where you have your save and save as, where you wanna save all your files. Those are probably, the save as, new, and open are probably the only 4 things that you're going to need to know from the file tab. And as for the edit one, I sent out the shortcut, keyboard shortcuts. So you guys can actually refer back to it later on to see, like, obviously it takes a lot of time. I mean, it's just that it's, for me personally, I memorize all the shortcut keys so that I can do Photoshop faster and more efficiently. So, but all the shortcuts are actually up here, and you'll see that, for example, under new, if you press Command End, it'll show, you know, the shortcut key right next to it, and you can always refer back to it and try to memorize all the shortcuts. So yeah, edit, we don't really need, the only thing that you need to know is copy, Command C, and paste, Command V from here, and everything else you can kind of disregard. If you are really into Photoshop and you want to make your own shortcuts, you can also go to keyboard shortcuts under here, and then you can change all that in there as well. And then for image, today we're going to go into adjustments, and we're probably going to touch upon brightness and contrast, levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, hue and saturation, color balance, black and actually no, we're not going to do black and white. And that's pretty much it from here. The other thing to note is image size and canvas size, which we can get into more detail later as well. So image is like an important tab to kind of like pay attention to. And as for the layers tab, I actually don't refer to this tab here as much because everything that you can do here is actually located on the bottom right of your, right here, where all your layers are, and you can actually access your layers here as well. And then type is where you'll find how you want your text to be shown. And so, but I also don't access that at all actually. The selection tool, all you're going to need is select all, which is Command A, and then Command D to deselect everything. So those are probably the only two that you're going to need from this tab as well. Filter, we're not going to go into detail, but if ever you want to, say for example, make a dress more voluminous or whatever, you would use the liquify tool. 3D and view are kind of, you're probably not going to access as much. So here's where we're gonna actually start. So I want, if everyone can go to window and then go to workspace and then go into and click on essentials. This is going to have all the essential items or toolbars laid out for you that you need to do everything that we're going to access later. And there's different tools for different reasons, and you can always customize them to your preference later. But I would just click on the essentials default one. And then you're going to check the boxes character. Make sure that these are all checked. Color, history, layers, properties, and then the last three on there, application frame, options, and tools. Make sure that those are checked so that you have all your tools opened. So yeah, so that's pretty much it in terms of tools that we'll be going over. And let me see, Ivy, did you get to send out the shortcut keys to everyone in the chat?
I'm sending it right now.
Okay, great. So the keys that I'll probably most be referring to is Command C, which is copy, Command V for paste, and then Command Z for undo. There's a lot, I know. It's gonna be hard to remember. It took me a while to memorize everything, but once you remember it and have it all memorized in your head, you're gonna be a pro and you're gonna be able to do Photoshop super fast. So Command C, copy, Command V, paste, Command Z, undo, and then Command A to select all, Command D to deselect, Command T to transform, Command J to duplicate, and Command plus sign and minus sign to zoom in and out. So those are the main keyboard shortcuts to accessing Photoshop that we'll be doing. And then a quick note, I know a lot of people use Mac. I have this mouse for the Mac, and you can, in order to right click, and whenever I say right click, it's it's a PC term, but you can right click in Macs. You can either hold the control key down and then click, and then it'll pop up with your right click option. Or if you have the same mouse that I have, you can just use 2 fingers and click on the right side. And that will also bring up the options as well. So whenever I say right click, just make sure to, use that. It is life changer. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a little bit of Photoshop retouching for some photos. We're gonna open GuoPay 5. And there's several different ways to open files. So you can either go to your Finder and drag the file into your Photoshop, or you can go to File, Open, and then you can choose it from there, from your folder. Or you can actually also go to the image in your Finder, right click, and then open with Photoshop 2019. for me. So that's pretty much it. So I just press Command + to zoom in so that you guys can look at it better. We're going to kind of go over quickly on how to edit basic needs for an image. And this is obviously taken by an iPhone, and you can kind of tell of how pixelated it is. Let me zoom in a little bit more. It's too much. So you can see that it's a little bit more pixelated, and you know, it's just not a good quality photo. And I noticed that in a lot of like fitting photos, a lot of times lighting plays a big role, and you just need a better lighting, and then it actually makes a world of a difference. So we're gonna go into detail about that. So right now we want to brighten this image just because I feel like this side is a little bit dark. So what you're going to do is go to Image, Adjustments, and then Curves. So, and that it will pull up this, this window here. And what you're gonna do is from the middle of the graph, you're gonna actually click on it, and then hold it, and then pull it up. And you see, like, you can go all the way, and that's like way too much brightness, but you can like lower it to however bright you want. So let's say that I feel like is bright enough for me right now. You see how big of a difference that made? So all I'm doing is hitting the preview. I'm turning it off to show you the difference. But again, you want to click on the middle of the graph, hold your mouse, and then pull it up to where you think you feel like is a good brightness level. So that's generally what I do to brighten images in Photoshop. There are other tools that you can use as well, such as a lot of people actually just go into brightness and contrast, and they just adjust it here. You can brighten it. The problem with this and then adjusting contrast is that oftentimes it doesn't do a very good job, and it tends to overly like the dress on this blue dress right here, it's like overblown, so it's too white, and I feel like that you don't really have as much control in brightness and contrast, and that's usually the problem with anything that's white that you want to edit. You're gonna realize like, oh no, this is getting overblown, but this dress is starting to look good. So it's kind of like a balance that you have to take into consideration. So that's the easiest way if you want to like just do a quick one as well. There's also levels. So again, it's image and then adjustments and then levels. This is very similar to the curves tool where you just drag the highlights. So the far right, it means highlights. The middle is midtones. And then the far left tab is shadows. So you can bring down the shadows. As you can tell, if I keep dragging it, it'll just basically make it all black. And then here are the highlights. You can bring up the highlights to brighten up the photo. Or if you feel like the midtones, like pretty much the midtones is like the colors that are not super dark, shadowy, or super highlighted, those are all your midtones. So when you bring midtones up, you know, already you can see that like it's not gonna overblow out the white dress on the right, but it's actually bringing in up more detail from the middle. And that's basically what curves does as well. So curves and levels is very, very similar. It's just dependent on how detailed you want to actually edit your photo. If you go to curves again, image, adjustments, and then curves, you can actually, like, let's say, and bring that up, and I want the shadows to be a little bit darker. you can go, and you can totally play around with any photo. And I would highly recommend you to do so, because anywhere you click on the graph, you can actually adjust it just to see how it would look. So I'm sorry, my dog is he's very needy. So here's what else you can do in the tabs in the curves tool is you can go actually to pinpoint certain colors. So for example, in a lot of fitting photos, because you're taking the photos indoor with fluorescent lighting, there's actually a green tint to all the photos. So what you would want to do is go to your green in your channels, go to green, and then you can pull down the green to make it, to add a little bit more magenta to it, just so that the skin tone looks better. It looks more warmer. It looks, it just looks more realistic, so that not everybody looks sick. So that's basically what curves does. And I would just play around with it. All the stuff on the right side here, you don't need to pay too much attention to. What I would just suggest is getting to know how to use the graph. You know, you can pull it in different ways just to see what effect it does and how it affects your image. And then go to channel, and you can go to red, green, or blue, and you can like adjust it however way and just play around with it. Once you develop an eye to like, oh, that photo has too much red in it, then you'll go to your channel and you'll like decrease the red. Or there's too much blue in this image. I don't want too much blue, so I'm gonna decrease it. And then basically you're adding yellow to your image. So that's basically what curves does. So now we're going to go into vibrance and saturation. So vibrance is a great tool if you just want to amp up the color in your photo just a little bit, but not overly saturate the photo. A lot of times when you saturate an image too much, it starts to do weird things to your image. Maybe not so much here because the lighting itself is blue, but it does very weird things for your skin. So I would actually highly not recommend the saturation tool, but just use the vibrance tool. So let's say, and it just amps up the color just a little bit, where you can like kind of see. So let's zoom in a little bit. So this is at max vibrance, 100%. And even then, you don't really see like a crazy saturation. It just kind of like makes it a little bit more vibrant. Saturation, on the other hand, let's see if we pull it down to 100, you'll start to see that like the dress here is starting to be a little bit green or a little bit orangey. Here it's also like very yellow, and this is all green here. So that's why the saturation tool is not so great. It's only if you use like a little bit of it. So we're gonna actually go into hue and saturation, and this is a great tool to use if you wanna change the color of something. So say for example, like, oh, I don't really like that color dress. I kinda want it to be red. So now you just changed the hue of the dress and you just made this whole image red. Obviously, this doesn't work if there are people with skin tones. That's going to change the hue on them as well. But because these are mannequins, it does not matter. And we can go into how you can selectively only change the color of one dress in an image. And we'll go into that afterwards. But you can play around with the hue. Like I said, you can change. Obviously, the easiest thing to notice is like the background. You're changing the entire color to whatever you want. One thing to note is that if you use low quality photos, the photos, as you move the hue, it'll actually decrease the pixels and make it more pixelated. So that's something to consider. You always want to use higher quality photos. And so the other thing is, like, how would you decrease saturation and make a photo black and white? So this is where you would go as well. You would just decrease saturation. Or if you want kind of like, I just want it slightly decreased in color and saturation, you would just decrease the saturation here. You can also do this in the vibrance tool as well, but you have a little bit more control of how you want to adjust the hue or, you know, whatever. Here. And then here is actually, you can go into individual colors to change the hue. Or like say, for example, actually we're gonna go into blues and we're gonna just change the blue colors. So everything that's not blue in the image will remain the same, but anything that has blue in it will change colors if you move the hue. So you can selectively choose specific colors to change the hue in. This last one here is lightness, and I actually never use it. I would actually go back to using curves or levels instead, because it kind of, oh wait, actually let's go back to, we'll go back to master. You'll notice that it kind of grays out your image and it entirely lightens your image and it makes it darker. Like it looks like there's an overlay over it instead of bringing out the details in the image. So I would actually not use this tool at all. Let's go back to 0. So that's it for vibrance and saturation. And then now we're gonna go briefly over color balance. And this is only if you have a firm grasp of all the colors already. And this is where you know what you really wanna do. So this is where it always defaults to midtones first. And then you can change, like, oh, you're like, oh, I want to add a little bit more cyan, or I want this color, this image needs a little bit more blue or magenta. And then you can go into highlights. I want the highlights to look more yellow or more red. And this is a little bit more advanced, so you don't need to get into this for the majority of the part. It's like I said, it's a little bit more advanced, and you can play around with it, but it's something that I use often as well. Okay, so now we're gonna get to the fun part, which is the healing brush, stuff that you want to get just delete from the image. So say, for example, this light reflection here, I don't want it. So you're gonna go to your healing tool, and it looks like a, kind of looks like an eraser, but if you hover over it long enough, you'll see that it says healing. We're gonna go to spot healing brush. And what that does is actually it takes a sample of everything inside the circle, and then it basically just copies onto the image and then erases it. So if you click on that, click on here, you erase it. Let's say I want to get rid of all these light sources. And how you can change the brush size, you can go up to your upper left corner, and you can change your brush size here. So if I want to have a bigger brush, then you can change it here. I'm just gonna leave it at 35, 34, 36. So that's what the healing brush, it's a very quick way to remove things from the photo. The next one is the healing brush tool. So the previous one was the spot healing brush, and then this one's the healing brush tool. And this one, you actually have to hold down the option key. And what it basically does is it takes a sample of whatever is in the circle, and then you're basically copying that over to where you want to click. So say, for example, I want to get rid of this line. So I'm going to pull that down. You click and hold, and you're going to drag all the way down. So that's how the this brush works in particular. You're basically taking a sample from somewhere else, but it doesn't work. So it's something that you have to pay attention to. So say for example, I picked this spot right here, right next to the mannequin's head. Because I took here, you're gonna notice that I'm basically drawing in or painting in another mannequin over it because it was too close. So what you always wanna do is you wanna pick an open space that there's nothing when you drag, it's not gonna show up, so. So that's how you use that tool. So these tools are great, but one thing, for example, let's say you're like, oh, I want to get rid of this line up here, but you use the same tool. Just press Option, and then it comes out like that. And you're like, wait, that doesn't match up. So go to your history and you're gonna hit undo or Command Z. Same thing with the spot healing brush. If you just do this, oh, that one actually, so okay. Usually what it does is that it creates, I think slightly older versions of Photoshop, it like creates a very blurry thing and it doesn't look good. So let's see. And you can tell right here, when we zoom in, it's not perfect. And you can tell that there's a little dip right here. So what you can do to get like a perfect erasure of this, erasing of that, you can go to your patch tool. And this one is really, really great. So what you do is hold down your mouse, click on the entire, like surround the entire area that you want to adjust. And what you're going to do is click on the center and then move it. And then align the top part. And then now it's like perfectly erased. So that's how you would use the patch tool. It's for, usually I use it for, to get cleaner lines, like right here. And then drag this out over here and make sure that's aligned. And that's how you would get that. So that's how you would do that. And that's pretty much it for the healing brush tool and to get a better grasp of, I guess, like erasing things from the background, especially since like sometimes you'll notice like, oh crap, I left like a coffee cup in the background. I just want to get rid of it so it's not distracting or whatever. So you can actually like use the patch tool, healing brush tool, or spot healing brush tool to get rid of that. You're getting rid of unnecessary things in the background. So now we're actually going to go into how to selectively either brighten or change the color of something. And this is where layer masks work. What you're going to do is go to the very bottom here. And when you click on the circle that is like half gray and then half white, you'll notice that it'll pop up with pretty much all the basic editing tools that you'll find in your image, but now you're going to actually make it into a layer mask. So what layer masks do is that you can selectively edit certain things in the background. So for example, in this image, the reason why I chose it is because there's a lot of things that we can do with it, especially where this image seems to be, there's a lot of light on that image, but it's pretty dark here. And let's say I want to brighten the dress on the one in the middle right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on I'll just call it the yin yang thing over here, down here, but it'll basically bring up a layer mask and you're gonna click on curves. And then what that's going to do is, let me just show you. it'll pop up in properties, and this is where you're going to make the adjustment. So I'm going to brighten the image to that. And you're gonna brighten it to how you see the other dress, how you want the other dress to look. So disregard, since the one on the right is like totally overblown, we're just gonna disregard that. We're just gonna focus on here right now. So I'm gonna bring it up just a little bit more like that. And now what you're going to do is click Command I, and that's gonna invert the layer. And now what you can do is take the brush tool where you paint things, and you can actually set your opacity not at 100%, but maybe like 55%. And I have my brush set at 54, the 54 size. So now you're just gonna paint over this mannequin. So you're gonna hold down, click and hold. Let's say I want to make the brush size a little bit smaller. What you would do is right click or press, what was it? Hold control and then click for right clicking. So I'm gonna right click, make the brush size a little bit smaller. And now you brightened the dress on the left without impacting the other images on the side. So difference here. And that's pretty much how you would use the layer mask tool. You're gonna need, so once we get into making collages, you'll probably want to make it into a clipping mask, which means, for example, let me just show you real quick. If you right click it and create clipping mask, it will only edit whatever is in here. So even if you, let's say, go over here, it's not actually going to affect the background image layer. So right now it's affecting because it's the same photo on top of another photo. But say, for example, you actually cut this dress out, and then you only want to edit that dress and you don't want it to affect anything else within your mood board, then you would right click and then click, where is it? Oh, it's because it's already clipped. So you would just right click and then find where it says clipping mask. So I just released it, but right click, create clipping mask. And that will only apply to the layer right below it. And that's only going to make changes there. So that's pretty much it for all the necessary tools in order to edit photos. We're actually going to go into how to make a mood board like this. So this will cover all the essential things that we need as well. So what we're going to do is, let's exit out of this. I'm not going to save it. Go to File, Open, and then we're going to open Google Pay 2 and Google Pay 4. So once we open those, now we're going to create a new file, a new document. I'm going to go to File, Create New. And I'm going to explain stuff here because it's very, very important to know. So this is where you're going to make where the width is and the height, and you can change it to pixels or inches, centimeters, millimeters. It will make the board the overall size of what you want it. If you're going to have this image to be printed, you know, use inches or centimeters. But if it's a digital file, then use pixels. So we're making this as an Instagram size. So it's going to be 1080 pixels by 1350. And the orientation is going to be vertical. So for digital files, in recent years, it's no longer 72. A lot of computers can handle the resolution to be 180, but I still keep it as 72 so that it actually loads images faster. So we're gonna keep the resolution at 72 pixels per inch. And then here, this is the other important thing. For example, you want to print, to send it off to like a really nice printer and you just want a really nice image printed, you always want to make the file CMYK. And that's a given. Anything that is going to be printed is always going to be CMYK color. Anything that is digital is always going to be RGB color. So since this is a digital file that we're making, we're going to keep it in RGB. And this part is, you're probably not going to notice too much of a difference. For people who are really heavy into Photoshop, they will start off at 16-bit and then they will make it, and then readjust the size later to make it 8-bit. It's just so that you have more colors to work with in your spectrum. But for the sake of this tutorial, 8-bit is completely fine. And for the most part, I just stick with 8-bit. The only time that I would need to up it to 16 or 32-bit is if I'm creating like a billboard. That's what I would be doing. So it's going to be 8-bit. I always keep it as black just because that's kind of the default that I always use. It's just like a clean and easy way to set a mood board. So we're just going to keep it at that. So it's all the settings are 1080 by 1350. Orientation is vertical, 72 resolution, and then RGB color, 8-bit, and the background is black. And let's create that. So now you have this. What we're going to do now is we're gonna go to Google Pay for this image. And you're going to go to click on or press Command A, and that's going to highlight the entire image or select the entire image. How you can also do it is go to Select and then All, and that will also do the same thing. So either Command A or go to Select All, and then it will do the same thing. One thing to note is when you click on this, on the rectangular selection tool, you'll notice that there's different ways of selecting. So for example, right now I have it on the subtraction selection, which means if I want to select it again, like this, that means I'm only selecting this part, and it deselected this rectangle right here. So let's say I want to add it back, then you would select the addition or the add to selection tool up here, and then let's say I just want this. And so you're basically only selecting everything within these lines, these parameters. So, but we're not going to do that. So what you're going to do is press Command D to deselect everything, and you're going to go back to selecting the entire image. So select all, and then now you're going to copy the image. Command C, and then go back to your mood board file, and you're gonna paste it. So by pasting, you can either go to edit and then paste, or shortcut Command V is what I've been doing. So you'll notice that the image is way too big for the mood board, and now you're going to resize it. So I'm gonna zoom out a little bit for you to see. And you guys can zoom out too, so you can press Command dash or Command minus sign, and that will, or Command plus to zoom out, zoom in. So what you're going to do is actually press on the layer Command T to transform this image. So now you can change it to whatever size you want. So older Photoshop versions, in order to not make it like warped like this, or like this. Older Photoshop versions, you have to press down, hold the shift key in order for it to basically resize so that it doesn't warp the image. So older Photoshop versions, you're gonna have to hold down the shift key. Newer Photoshop versions, it took me a while to make that adjustment because I constantly press the shift key, but new 2019 and later, you don't need to press that key anymore. It'll just resize it to like, it'll lock the layer so that it's easy to resize. Since we have a little bit of time, I'm actually going to explain to you how you can actually resize this to exactly the size that you want. So if you go to your properties tab over here, you'll see that there's width and there's height. And let's say I just want this to be like 5 inches. Then you can change that way. And that's going to be 5 inches on your board. And because it's locked, which it should always be locked because you don't want your image to be warped, you're going to leave that. So again, let's say I want it to be 10 inches. Then it's going to be 10 inches exactly. Especially, this is important if you want to print specifically for to have your file sizes the same as how it's going to be printed, you know? So what you can do is actually make the canvas an 8x11 sheet of paper and then size it according to how big you want it. So right now I'm not gonna actually use that. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. So I'm gonna press Command T again to transform it. And I'm just gonna make it a little bit smaller. And you can drag it, you can move it around, click on it and drag it. And then how you would lock it in place is by pressing Enter. And that would get rid of you know, the highlighted bar for transforming. Again, this is what we're going to be making. So we're gonna kind of mimic this mood board here. So now that you have that, let's go back into the same image. And now press Command D to deselect. And then you're actually what's great about this mood board is that you want to bring out some of the details from the actual clothing item, right? So for this costume piece or for this couture piece, I want to actually highlight the sleeves. And so what I like to do for mood boards is I will take exactly from the sleeve, I will use the rectangle selection tool, and then I'm just gonna highlight that section on the sleeve, and then I'm gonna copy that, Command C, go back to the mood board and paste it, Command V. Again, you can go to edit and like do it in this way, copy, paste. But if you have the hotkeys memorized, it's like very useful. So now notice that right here we have 2 different layers, and I actually want this to be on the bottom. So what you would do is actually drag it underneath that layer to put it behind the initial image. So we're gonna drag that to the back, and I'm gonna resize it a little bit. So Command T to transform, and then Enter to lock it in place. So that's that. And another really important thing to remember to do is to always label your layers. I have a really bad habit of doing that, but you must, because once you start editing, for example, when you're creating mood boards, you're going to have 20, 25 layers, and it's going to be impossible to find if you don't actually name all your layers. So I'm just going to label this image 1. Wait, actually, sorry, that was the background image 1, and then image 1. So how you would rename it is you click on it, double click on it, and then you can rename it. So click, double click, and then rename. So that's how you would do that. Okay, so the next thing is how it feels like this part on the bottom of the sleeve right here is starting to blend in, and I actually want to highlight this photo. I want to frame it. So how you would frame an image is you would go click on the image layer and then right click, go to blending options, and then it will bring you this window. And then what you're going to do is actually you're going to go to stroke. And it might be different on yours, and that's okay. I have mine set as 2 pixels. So that's basically what the frame is going to be. It's going to be 2 pixels wide all around. And you can make that bigger, smaller, according to however much you want to frame the image. I just wanted it to be a little bit highlighted. So the other thing is to note is you can actually place the frame on the inside of the image, which will give you, I will show you, let me zoom in on this a little bit better. So again, it's blending, stroke. So you notice that it's, when you click on inside, the frame is much sharper, it's more angular. But as you click on center, it's a little bit more rounded. And then when you click on outside, it's even more rounded. So it depends on what you prefer. If you want a more rounded rectangular frame, then you can click on outside. If you want something more angular, then I would click on inside, which is what I did. And then blending mode, normal, opacity, 100%. And this is where you can change the color of the frame. So if you click on the box, the color box, you can change it to whatever color you want. So let's say I want it to be red. You can make it red here. Or let's say you're like, I want to actually pick a color from the actual image. Let's say I want it to be blue. So as soon as you drag your mouse over out from this frame, your color picker tool will actually pop up, and you can click on the blue part of the crown and you can make the frame blue just to match the colors of the entire image. So for this, I want to keep it white, so I'm gonna leave it as white. And you can always preview it. I always click on preview because I always want to see a sample of how it's going to look like. So, and that's it. That's all you need. And we're gonna press OK. And let me zoom back out, Command minus or Command dash. And we're gonna do the same thing with the other image. So let's go to Pay 2. And a little bit of how you would use the selection tool for this. So I kind of actually want to go over the other, how you would use other different selection tools here. So we're gonna click on the lasso tool, and we're gonna click on, if you right click, so right click or hold Control and then click, we're gonna go to the magnetic lasso tool. And what this does is that it will actually, if you click once of where it starts, you just drag your mouse. You don't even have to hold your mouse. And it will basically start making points all the way around, and it's taking color differences. So this only works if there's a big color difference from the background to what you're wanting to highlight to cut out. So I'm gonna drag this all along her arm, and you wanna do it slowly because if you do it too fast, it starts to pick up information where you don't want it to pick up. So let's say I'm just going to get the mannequin and the dress. And what you can also do to make it, to highlight, to select it better, you can click along the way as well. Like, oh, this point, especially right here, you'll notice that there's the shadow and the choker is actually starting to do weird things, like right here. You can tell that it's not even following the same path anymore. So it's probably better that you continuously click around it. So let's do that. I'm going to zoom back out. So notice that it just went haywire when I zoomed back out. It's kind of the issue with using this tool. And we'll fix that in a bit. And then to close it is, this is how you would close it. So once you hover over the beginning point of where you started your click, the tool is going to pop out with a little circle. I wonder if you can tell. And that's how you would close it. Or the easiest way is actually just to double click and then it will highlight the entire or select the entire image of where you want it to be selected. So right here, it kind of went haywire. So I'm gonna go back up to up here to the upper left corner, and I'm gonna click on the subtract from selection. And I'm just gonna click there to start and then go around it. And then that doesn't matter. So now I deselected that part. And this is great for like things that you really want to select and copy onto your mood board in detail. So I'm just gonna deselect that. So you could press Command D. Let's say I really just want this choker here. Another way you can do it is by using the polygon lasso tool. And this one only does it in straight lines. So if there's curves, then you're gonna have to like click quite a bit. So for this, we're just gonna use the magnetic lasso tool again. And I'm gonna show you once I do this, how it's going to look. And I'm periodically clicking just to make sure that the selection doesn't go like in weird spots. You probably should zoom in. So for something like this, you want to really take your time so that you're not going to do a bad job, which I kind of am because I'm not taking my time with this. But if you were, so I'm just going to try to get this quickly as possible. And this is great if you just want to isolate a specific thing, especially like I said, fitting photos. You can just select the entire actor and put them on a black background, so none of the background stuff that you see is distracting or anything like that. So I'm almost done. So almost here, I'm just gonna double click. Zoom back out, and then I'm going to copy that, Command C, and go back to the mood board and press Command V. Now you have selected just the necklace part, right? And if you press Command T, you can change it to whatever size you want in order to fit your mood board. So yeah. But we're not going to actually use that for that image here. The other thing that I wanted to go back to in teaching is I'm going to press Command D. So this tool is very good. This is the quick selection tool or the magic wand tool. Quick selection is like, let's say, for example, it has to be a very clean image in order to be able to do that. So if I just click and hold, it'll basically highlight or select everything within the image if the colors are very different from each other. But you'll see that once I do this, it basically selected this entire back part because the color between the corset here and the background color is too close in color. So that's why it wouldn't work. But it worked perfectly on the white mannequin. So we're gonna press Command D to deselect it. But that's basically how that tool works. It's very good if it's like a clean product image and you just want to get the product and just quickly select it and then copy and paste it onto your mood board. But that's not what we're going to use. What you can also use is the magic wand tool. And this one's really great. And what I usually do is I'll click like a background, and that basically highlighted the entire background here. And now I have it as adding another selection. So I'm gonna click on the right side. But notice how, because this part is too close in color to the background, it started highlighting the corset part as well. So we're just gonna disregard that for now, but we're gonna click here, and then we're gonna click here as well. So we're gonna actually go back. The great thing about using these selection tools is it's interchangeable. So you can always go back and it won't deselect anything that you just selected. So we're gonna go to the magnetic lasso tool. Right click magnetic lasso. And since I have it on, subtract, so you're gonna subtract this part. So if you notice, it won't actually commit because the colors are too similar. So instead of using that, let's actually go to the polygonal lasso tool. So now you can just like use straight lines and click along the corset and double click to end. And we're gonna do the same thing over here. Start it off here. Click around it. And if your image doesn't require like a clean cutout, you won't need to spend as much time on this. But if you want a really precise, clean cutout, this is basically what you would do. There's another way to select things, and that's by using the vectors selection tool, but that is a whole nother beast that we'll cover next time. So now I only basically selected everything that's in the background. And this is a lot easier to do when you have a lot of detail on the clothing item or like jewelry or whatever. I would always select a background and then I would right click, select inverse, so that I would, you know, quickly do that, so that I would be able to select only the costume piece itself, if that makes sense. So now that I'm looking at it, I see that this part is a little bit wonky because it didn't select properly. So I'm gonna go back to the lasso tool and then go to add selection. It's add selection now because you're adding to what you have selected. So let's select that real quick. And with this tool, you'll have to click multiple times, which is kind of annoying to do, but it has a better accuracy, if that makes sense, for now. Okay, this, there. Now we have everything selected. We're gonna press Command C to copy, and then go to your mood board and press Command V to paste. And now you have your image cut out pretty like perfectly, pretty good for 1 minute of selecting. And you can do that, and you can have that like as a cutout, and you can, whoops. What you can do is also rotate it. So Command T, whoops. So Command T, and then you can rotate it this way. So what you would do is on the 4 corners, When you hover on the outside, it'll create like a curved arrow. Oops, I should probably zoom in on this. You'll see that it'll have a curved arrow, and then you can actually rotate it, and it'll pop up with the degree that it is in. You can actually, if you press shift or hold shift as you're rotating, it will lock to specific angles. Like usually it's like 15, 30, 45. So that's the reason why it's not doing that is because I transformed it too soon. So Command T, and then let's hold shift and then move it. So now it's 15 degrees, 45 or 30, 45, 60. And then if you want to rotate it to 90 degrees, that's how you would do it as well. Let's rotate that back. But I'm gonna go over a little bit of how else you can free transform this image. Zoom in. So if you right click, you'll have free transform is generally what we're doing to scale the image. Scale and free transform, very similar now. So I would just stick with free transform. Rotate is how you would just rotate it by angle. Skew is only if you want to do like weird things. And actually we use this a lot for costume illustrations. We would skew a clothing item piece in order to make it fit onto a body. That's what you would do. And then you can distort it. Again, you can pull it in different ways and it'll do weird things. You're probably not going to need that. You can warp it. So say for example, I just want this to be over here. Just want it to be wider in general. I want the arm to be wider. I want the chest to be fuller. So you can warp it that way as well. So I'm gonna go back to history and then do it again. And here you can rotate it by 180 degrees, rotate it 90 clockwise. So we'll do that. 180, 90 clockwise, 90 counterclockwise. It'll just rotate to whatever it says. Let's go back to 180. And then this one's important because sometimes things don't fit properly and you just want to flip the image. So you would just flip horizontally. Or if you're making design elements, you want to flip it vertically, then you have it like that, upside down. We're not going to do that. And we're actually just going to delete this image. And how you would hide something that you might not need right now is you go back to your layers tab and click on the eye button and it'll make it disappear. So like we had the necklace cut out and we also have this image cut out as well. We don't really need those, so I'm just gonna invisible it to make it invisible. And the reason why I don't delete the layer right away is because sometimes when you're making a mood board, you feel like you might need it for something else. Like maybe you need this to fill a space somewhere. Like I just need it. And instead of having to cut and select the entire image again, I'm just gonna make it invisible so that I won't have to do it again. And that for me, I feel like is way better than, you know, going back and forth and trying to select everything all over. So we're just gonna label this, click on the layer and then double click and then we're gonna name it choker. This one. And you can name it like however way you want, and that this is just, you just need labeling whatever. But for you, whatever is best for you to remember what that actual layer is, because as you can tell in the layers tab, everything is really small and it's hard to locate. So like these images are kind of big, so it will show up on your layers tab, but when you have like an image that's like an earring, you're not going to be able to find it on the layers tab. So that's really important. And then let's just actually go over here right now. The history layer option here, or a history window, is really important to be able to go back on your work. And the great thing about Photoshop is you can go pretty far back in your actions. So let's say you did, I think it's 60 actually. I can't remember the exact number of actions you can do until you cannot go back to your work. So it's important to actually save periodically. But after I think about 60 actions, you can't go back to make changes. So let's say you're on your 60th action and you want to go back and change something. You probably cannot do that. So that's why it's important to periodically save and make sure that all your layers and everything looks okay before you move on to the next action. Okay, let's see. Oh, actually, let's go over this part. So remember in our other, in our previous photo editing, we want to actually create layer masks and clipping masks, so that in order for you to not change the color of anything behind or anything else on the mood board, what you would do, I'm just gonna open these layers up to show you how that's going to be. So when I make a layer mask, let's say I'm going to change the hue and saturation. I'm going to change it. And I'm going to change it over here in the properties. You'll notice that it's changing all the images on the board, but you just want to change this image itself, the corset one. So what you would do is you would right click that layer and click on create clipping mask. And that is only going to change only that layer in color. So that's really important if you have a ton of stuff on your mood board and you're like, I just need to change this one dress's color. That's how you would do it. Again, I'm gonna show you how to do it. So I'm dragging the layer to delete it in the trash bin. All right. Oh. Again, you go to the circle with the black and white circle in half, and then you would go to hue and saturation, and then change it to whatever color you want first. Let's say I want it pink, and then right click, create clipping mask. And then that is only going to change the color for this image, this layer in particular. So yeah, that's what it does. And then, and the reason why we're not going into directly going to image and adjusting it here, I'll show you why. It's because once you do that, you can't go back and change it. You can't make adjustments once you start adding different actions. Like, let's say you're like, okay, I like this how it looks right now. And then you go back to working on different parts of the mood board. And then you realize, oh no, I don't want the color to look like this. You can't adjust it. I mean, you can go back to the image and adjust it, but then it loses its, what is it, details in it, so it makes it more pixelated, so you don't want to edit it that way. That's why it's not good to go over there. That's why you want to make a layer mask, and you click on that over here, create new fill or adjustment layer. And you can do that with curves as well. Click on curves, and then in your properties window, say I want it to be bright. And then right click, create clipping mask. And it will only clip to that one layer that you want to make changes to. And this way you can always go back and adjust it. For for example, you can also do multiple clipping masks. So let's do another one. We'll go back to hue and saturation. And then I'm gonna change it to this pink. And it's still clipped onto that. So you can always go back and make changes and change it to however way you want. But if you don't make a layer mask, then you cannot change it back without losing detail. So that is the beauty with layer masks. I'm just gonna delete those. Make those invisible for now. So now we're gonna actually go and do the same thing of what we just did with these two images. We're gonna go to this image again. We're gonna select the entire image, Command A, Command C to copy, and let's paste that onto this mood board. Command V to paste. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. And obviously it's too big, so Command T to resize it. I'm just eyeballing. There's two ways of how to ensure that, like for print, you want it exactly however big you want. It's, for example, on the actual image, you can go to image size, and you can change it to whatever width you want. You want it to be printed 5 by 6. So then you click OK, and then it'll automatically change it to 5 by 6 print size. Another thing to note here is that you'll notice that the resolution is 72, and that's because it's a image pulled from the web, right? So anything that you pull digitally online is usually 72 resolution. And that's just because it just loads faster. When you have the resolution set as 300, that is what you want for it to be printed. That's why you want to make your mood boards, if you're going to be printing, always 300 DPI. And that's it. That's how you adjust size. So let's actually go back and deselect everything, Command D, and then we're gonna actually use the rectangle selection tool, and then select this detail part of the dress. Sorry, I should probably zoom in. And press Command C to copy that. Go back to your mood board, Command V, and now we have this layer on top of both these different images. And I do not want that. If I put this underneath the first image, it's still gonna cover the second image. The very first image that we did. And I actually want to put this in the back. So I'm gonna drag it all the way to the bottom over here. And that way, and the great thing about layers is like whatever is on the very top, that's what's going to be the top layer. So imagine like if it's a sandwich, the very top thing is like always going to be most visible and not going to be covered, and everything on the bottom, as you layer underneath, it's just going to be stacked underneath. So that's why it's important to label your layers, because it's going to be impossible to find. The great thing about Photoshop 2019 is that you can actually, and this wasn't available before, the older Photoshop versions, you can actually click on each layer. Like I just clicked on this, and it will automatically highlight the actual layer in your layers window. And that's so useful. But in the older Photoshop versions, you cannot do that. You have to find it and then highlight it and then move whatever. So let's say I want to move this. I just click that and then I can move it. But in the older Photoshop files, you actually have to go to the layers, click on that layer, and then move it. And that's always been kind of an issue, but it's much easier now for the newer Photoshop version. So what we're going to do is we move that all the way to the bottom so that it sits behind this image, the first image. I'm going to move this. Actually, I'm gonna make the second image. Let's rename that to image 2. So again, you click on the layer and double click. And then I'm gonna rename that the background image to just so that you can reference them really easily. So that's that. And then I'm actually going to just resize this image real quick, just a little bit smaller. Command T, and then just make it slightly smaller. Okay. If you guys remember, to add a border, right click, blending options, stroke, and that's it. And so now we're going to add text. So click on your text, which is the T tool, and you're gonna click and drag into a box of however big you want. So just gonna make it that big. And I'm going to use Edwardian script font. So in your character window, you can change it here. I'm just gonna type. So right now it's super tiny. Oh, sorry, I have these turned on so it wasn't blinking properly. So I typed out Guopei, which is the designer of these two couture dresses. And this part is actually important to note, and this is how you change some of your text. So this is where your different text options are. In Photoshop 2019, there's actually a bug in it where if you download fonts from outside that are not already on your computer, the bigger the font you make, the more your Photoshop is going to lag. So once you hit 72 and above, every action that you make is gonna take like 5 minutes. So it's important to just use whatever you have as fonts on your computer. So that's why I'm using Edwardian scripts. And this is kind of a well-known problem that they've been having. I don't know if they updated in the 2020 version, but in the 2019 version, that's like a huge problem. And it's very annoying. So that's where you change the font style. And then here, you can change it. If the font allows, it has an option for italicize, bold, then that's where you would change it. And then this is where you change the font size. I'm going to do 100. So notice once I change it to 100, it overlapped. And the reason why it overlapped is because this part right here, the lines in between is only 30 instead of 100. So it should always actually match the text size. So change it to 100 to match the text size. And here, for tracking, because it's a cursive font, as you can see that it's not connected. And the reason why is because this is not at 0. So this tool is good for if you want to make your fonts spread out more for a cleaner look. A lot of graphic designers tend to spread out Helvetica. It's like the universal font that a lot of graphic designers use. And they'll spread it out really far apart. But you can spread it out to 100, to 0. You can make it even closer together. But generally, just leave it at 0. And once you highlight the font, you can actually change the color. So I'm going to change it to, you can pick a color wherever you want on the color wheel or on this color spectrum, or you can pick a color from the photo. So I'm gonna pick this gold part of the dress, just because I want everything to look very cohesive. And click OK, and that's it. So that's how you would add a font, and you can click out and then drag it wherever you want. So let's see. Maybe I'm actually going to, so how you would change the font again, click on the font tool, click on the font or wherever it is, and then it'll pop up the edit tool. I'm going to actually make it, I'm gonna press enter, put it on the second line. I'm gonna off center it a little bit. So do that. And we're gonna actually fill up this space right here in a little bit, but we're just gonna leave the font up here for now. And then I actually wanna go into another thing that you can do with fonts, which is, let's make another font, rectangle. And let's see, I'm gonna type, this is what it was before. I'm just gonna copy this onto our chat box, and then you can probably, you can just copy and paste that text. Or you can just type whatever text you want. It does not matter. It's only for this exercise. So copy, select all. You would press Command C or highlight whatever the text is on the chat box. And then for me, because I'm directly getting it, it's Command A, Command C, copy, and then Command P to paste. So one thing to note is that usually when you paste paragraphs onto Photoshop, and especially if you're centering it, so you're gonna notice that it cuts off your words. And you're probably gonna have to proofread a little bit, but I usually just press enter to move it to the second line so that none of the words are cut off. And it's just like a small thing that's like annoying for us, but it makes it so much easier for whoever's looking at your presentation for it to be very neat and clean. And that's just a small thing that you can do. So another thing that you can do here, so I actually have it as the Times font. And you can actually make it bold here as well. It's a fake bold. It's not the font's bold. It's very similar. You can make it bold, or you can make it fake italicized. And then this is where you can make all your, like, for example, this is where you can, if you don't have it on that. So since it's a Times New Roman font, you can actually highlight that. If you want it to be all caps, just click on this double T and it'll make it all caps. That way you don't have to, all caps, type it in all by yourself. Or you can make it small caps. So that way it'll have like the uppercase in a bigger cap and then the lowercase in a smaller cap. You can do that as well. And then you can change it back to lowercase, uppercase and lowercase right here. And that's the important thing to note for this here. It's a little bit more advanced, but it really does polish your entire piece a lot more. So I would highly recommend just spending a little bit more time to looking into that. You can also go to paragraphs. So right next to character, there's a paragraph tab. And you can align your text to the left, center, or to the right. And it's very, very useful, especially when you're making mood boards, because not everything is always centered. So, but for this, I'm gonna keep it as centered. Okay, leave that there. So what we're going to do next is make a line tool. And this is to make borders, just to highlight, just to create more depth into your work. So let's click on, I have it on the rectangle tool, but I'm not sure what you guys have it. It should be on the rectangle tool. It's the rectangle vector tool. So right click that and click on the line tool. And you'll actually set the fill. So this is usually applied to rectangle tools or any of the other vector tools, but it's to fill the inside of whatever object that you're making. So since it's a line tool, I'm gonna set the fill, I'm gonna fill it with, I don't know, I want it to match the photo. So I'm not gonna use the color picker from the color chart, but I'm gonna pick it from the dress again, a yellow. And then the stroke is basically an outline, right? As what we did for outlining the portraits. But we're gonna actually turn that off. So make sure that there's a red line. Whoops. So stroke, we're having that turned off. Make sure there's a red line across it. So that means it's turned off. And I have the weight set to 2. That's how thick your line is going to be. So we're gonna draw that line here. So click, hold, and then if you want it to go horizontally across perfectly, hold down the shift button and it will align that. Again, let me do that again. So click, hold your mouse, drag it across to where you want it to end. And then let's say you're drawing like a super long line. In order for it to be 180 degrees and flat, hold down the shift key and it will make it flat. So that's how you make a line. We're actually going to rename that to line, top line. And then, because I like balance, so I'm actually going to duplicate that line. And how you would duplicate is Command J, and that duplicated it. Or you can go to the line and then just press, there should be a duplicate. You can right click the layer and then click on duplicate layer, but Command J is faster. So I duplicated that line, and usually once you duplicate something, it lands right on top of that item, the same layer. So it looks like there's no change, right? But when I move it, so we're gonna go here. We're gonna click on the move tool. I'm gonna drag that down. You have to click on it. And then I would actually hold shift in order for the line not to move haywire, because I want it to be aligned to this top line here. So I'm gonna click on that and then press shift and see how it pretty much moves exactly to how the top line is, exactly aligned. And it only happens if you hold down the shift key. So that's really important. So we're gonna go back to that layer and label it the bottom line. Okay, we're almost done, and then we're gonna have questions. So the other thing to do is to make rectangles for color swatches, which I feel like it really adds to the mood board. So we're gonna go back to not the line tool, but you're gonna right click the line tool and click on the rectangle tool. And now we're going to create a rectangle. So I'm gonna do it up here. You just click and drag to however big you want it. And I actually want the rectangle to be a different color. So I'm going to go to Fill, click on that color chart, color picker tool, and then I actually want a blue color this time to really highlight the gems of this costume piece, or this couture piece, I would say. Seems like I want a brighter blue color. So there, clicked on that, and that changed. So if you want the same exact rectangle and same exact size, instead of drawing another rectangle and trying to match it up, you would duplicate it. So right click, duplicate layer. Okay. And then click on the move tool. And I would hold down the shift button before you move it. So click, hold down the shift key, and then drag it to the right. So now you have two rectangles that are exactly the same size, but I don't want it to be the same color. So I'm going to change this, click on this, click on the actual layer that you want to change the color to, go back to the rectangle tool, click it, and then I would change the fill color to, let's say, this part of the crown. And that's how you change the color, and also make sure that these two are the same. So another thing that you can do is grouping things. And we're gonna actually group these two rectangles together. So you click on the first rectangle. Oh, let me rename this. Rectangle. So click on the first rectangle, hold the shift key, click on the next one, and you have highlighted both layers. And what you're going to do is click on the folder tab down here on the bottom right, create a new group. And you basically put those two layers into a group. And the reason why you want to do this is so that you can move the two layers. The thing that you have to keep in mind with the newer Photoshop version is that because it's convenient to click and move one layer, when you actually want to move an entire group, even if you click on the group layer itself, it doesn't do that. So what you have to do is press Command T to technically transform, and you can move this both at the same time. So press enter, and then it snaps back into place. And then we can do the same thing with the text here with the lines. So let's do that. Bottom line. The other way that you can do it, let's say you want to highlight layers from in different orders, and they're not always like right on top of each other. Press, you can hold the command key and click on each layer. And that also highlights the different layers all together. And then group that. And then I'll just put text. And you can move that as well. So Command T to highlight everything. And you can move the lines and the text all together. So another thing real quick before we do our very last step, this one is also important if you want to align your layers. So let's say you have a mood board and you have all the different fitting photos right next to each other, but they're all not aligned. They're not aligned perfectly on the top. What you would do is you would highlight all the layers that you want to align. So in this case, I'm gonna do all three of these, the bottom line, top line, and the text. And then when you click on the move tool, you'll have the align option up here. So I'm gonna align it to the center. It's pretty centered right now. It was slightly off center. If you notice that the lines moved a little bit. Just to make sure that everything is aligned in the center. So say for example, you want to align these two images together at the very top. You want it just to be flat on the top. So you would click on image 2, hold command, and click on image 1. And then up here, you can actually align it to the left, or you can align it in the center, or you can align it to the right. So it'll align to wherever you have the edge to, or you can align it to the top. But now they're like right on top of each other. So that's how you would use the align tool, which I think is very, very useful just to make sure that everything is straight and perfect and aligned. And you can also distribute your lines so that there's equal space in between everything. You can also do that by, it's a little bit harder because we only have like 2 images that we're working with, but up here is where you can distribute, right here, sorry, this is the distribute button. It says distribute horizontally, and it'll basically have, if you click on that, it'll have a evenly distributed space in between each image that you highlighted in your layer, which is great because then you won't have like one image that's like really far away from another and another one that's super close to each other, but you can distribute it evenly all across the board. Okay, so last step, black is a great background, but like, I feel like in order to really tie in the entire image better, always pick colors from the photographs because that's kind of like your color palette. And these are really great images because it's taken by the same photographer, same lighting, so that you know the color palette is within the same thing. But what we're going to actually do is we're gonna create a new layer. So click on background, and then here's like an icon that looks like a piece of paper that's like folded at the very end or very corner of it. That's the create new layer tab. So we're gonna create a new layer. And the reason why I had it at, wanted you to click on background first and then layer is because we're actually going to color the entire background. So I want that layer to be at the very bottom and that it's not gonna cover any of the images that we have. So what we're going to use is use the paint bucket tool. And as you notice, when I click on it, there's no color chart that popped up, right? So what we're going to do is go to this color square right here, click on that, and that's gonna show up with the color picker tool. And you're going to pick whatever color you want from this image. I'm gonna choose a darker green color over here. It's, as you can tell, it's like almost black, but it's not quite. So I'm gonna choose here. And then now I'm gonna just click on the background. Well, that's not really green, so let's change that. So there. And then you can like I said, if it's not on the very bottom, let's say I move it to in between, then you basically covered all the rest of your other layers. But you always want to keep your background layer all the way at the bottom, and everything that you want visible to not be covered is always at the very top. So that's pretty much it of how this Photoshop 101 class is going to be. It was a lot of information, but these are all the essential tools that I use to make all my mood boards. If you want to go into more detail, it's pretty much the same thing that I use to do my illustrations as well. So I'm actually gonna open up the chat box and see if you guys have any questions. We have about 15 minutes. Let's see. Couture piece, yes. How do you make the border? So the border is, we're gonna go back. I'm just gonna disable layer effects just to show you again. So border, right click the image, go to blending options, and then go to stroke. And then you can make your border size however big you want, but you know, and that. And then the color, you can change the border to whatever color you want as well. Press OK. I have it on disabled right now, but whoops. And then go back to stroke and change it back to 2. Because it was like way too of a fat border. But you can change it to however thick you want the border to be. I can't get my line tool to give me more than one line. What am I missing? Oh, you have to press Command J to duplicate the layer. So if you don't see that in your group, in your layer, you only have one line tool made, then it means that you didn't make an extra, you didn't duplicate the layer. So what you would do is go back to, let me go here. Press on the line tool, layer, so the top line, that's what I named it, and press Command J, and you would duplicate that layer. And then you can go and move the layer, oops, to wherever you want. You got to be careful in moving the line tool because it's so thin. You literally have to click directly onto the line, or else you're going to move like what I did. You're going to move the background layer. You're going to move different things instead. So you kind of have to zoom in to make sure you click on the right tool or the right layer. I'm going to delete that. Any other questions that you guys want to know how to do, or what you might, what you feel like you might need? Sure. So Diana, if you have a, if you have to go, I can go over it really quick again, how you would do a layer mask. You just click on the layer, and then here on the very bottom, it says create new fill or adjustment layer. You click on that, and then it will pop up with things that you can edit your image by. So it could be vibrance, hue and saturation, whatever. Let's say hue and saturation. You have that. And then you want to only edit the image below it. So you would right click, create clipping mask. And then now, I'm sorry, can't say. And then now you can just change the hue to whatever you want, and it will only adjust that layer by itself. So that. And that's it. That's how you would do a clipping mask. The other way to do it is if you are really adamant about not doing a clipping mask and you just want to do the whole thing, here's another way. There's like a million ways to do everything on Photoshop. So let me just show you real quick. I'm gonna drag that layer up here. So once I dragged the clipping mask layer, it actually just disappeared. It's no longer clipped to that layer. Now I'm going to actually, remember what we did when we were photo editing? How you can like brighten up just one part of the image. So this is kind of working the same way. You're applying it to all your images right now, but we're only gonna be selective of what we want to edit. So we're gonna press Command I to invert. You always have to press Command I to invert first. I don't know why, but that's just how it works. And then go to your brush tool. And let's say, sorry, should have seen what I was doing first. I moved the hue just to change it. Let's say I want to change just this corset part. So now that I pressed the brush tool, I can just only change that. But you can also change, let's say, the sleeve. Like I just want the sleeve to match the corset. So now it applies to all your layers if you don't have a clipping mask on. Sometimes I want to select a portion to work on, but want to exclude just one portion. Can I do that? What do you mean by one portion? Do you mean by like selecting only the crown, for example? Oh yeah, I guess so. I'm not sure if that works. Ivy, question. I'm not really understanding the question, and Diana is asking if she can say something.
Oh yeah, anyone can unmute themselves if they
Okay.
want to.
Hi,
Sure.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've got 7 minutes before I go live. But for instance, on the picture on the right, say I had used the smart tool and hit all of the background, then did invert. Now I have the mannequin, the collar, and the costume.
Mm-hmm.
What if I want to paint the mannequin purple, but I want to make sure that I don't get any purple on the collar? Can I then select within the selection the collar? If that makes sense.
Yes, you most definitely can, but
Yeah.
it's a much more advanced technique and
Okay.
it takes more time to do. But
Yeah.
you can, an easy way of what we learned so far is if you just select the entire mannequin. So you would have to use the selection tool with the magnetic lasso.
Yeah.
Select all that and then copy that layer.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, let me just do it really fast and show you. And then this can be recorded and you can reference it later.
Okay.
So say, for example, let me just exit this real quick. And I'm only gonna do a small part because of time, because I also wanna make sure that everybody saves their files properly. Okay, so I selected the mannequin's arm. I'm gonna copy it, Command C,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna paste it, Command V.
Okay.
So now what you can do, there's many, many different ways to do this, but easiest way is, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but let's see if that works. You go to adjustments, replace color, or you can do it on the layer mask too. But let's say the color is white. Obviously it's white. Okay, so obviously this part didn't work. But what you can do is you would actually have to do multiple layer masks and then adjust the hue and saturation. You would have to like color it in manually. So let's try.
So basically you're making several copies and then adjusting the copies, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the best way to go about it because you don't want to mess up the original image. You always want to have the original image like as is, because in case you want to go back to make changes, you have it. But there are several ways, and I feel like I won't be able to squeeze it all in the next like couple minutes. But if you can email me after, and I can like show you.
Thank you.
More detail.
I'm going to sign off, but thank you so much. Really,
yeah, of course.
Okay.
Okay, before we get to any other questions, I actually want to just show how you save your files real quick, because this is really, really important. And yes. So what you want to do is go to File, Save As. And I know everybody understands how to save, but there are many options to save in Photoshop. You can save your always, cannot stress this enough, always save a Photoshop file, because that means you can always go back and change whatever. Let's say you take this mood board to the director and they're like, I don't like this one image. Can you change it with something else? If you only save it as a JPEG, you have to redo the entire thing. If you save it as a Photoshop file, it will save all the layers with you, including the edits. So you can always go back and change them. So that's really important. Couple of things to note or take notes of when you're saving to print. When you're saving, you always have to save either as a PDF file, Photoshop PDF file, or a TIFF. So Photoshop PDF, Photoshop TIFF. You can also save it as Photoshop RAW, but these take up so much space on your computer. I will only recommend it if you need to print that day, save it as that file and then delete it because it takes up a lot of space on your computer. TIFF is probably the best to print usually, but a lot of printing places allow just Photoshop files now, so you can just save and give them the Photoshop file as is. But always remember that if you're printing, it needs to be 300 DPI. I know that when we're printing collages or like just images in general for a mood board, we don't really care even if it's a little pixelated, and that's fine. But if you're printing, let's say, a costume rendering, an illustration, it is very important that that illustration is printed in 300 DPI. And that's something you should always tell your illustrators as well. Or else the colors are not right and then it comes out pixelated, sizing is wrong. So you want the best quality to show when you're printing stuff like that. The other thing to note, and this is like kind of like more for digital formats of saving, which is JPEG, and the difference between JPEGs and PNG files. PNG will save, so especially with the FYC stuff that we saw in a lot of the emails, a lot of them, the images were actually blurry, especially when you see the text, you'll notice that it's a little bit pixelated. And the reason why is because a lot of those images are saved as JPEGs instead of PNGs. PNGs will save your text, your image file with the text as clear and sharp. So you always want to, if there's text in your image, you want to save it as a PNG file and then send that instead of a JPEG. JPEG is great for images only. So, and then that's kind of like why we constantly see those, but that's pretty much it. Are there any last minute questions? Oh yeah, and Ivy put down my email if you guys have questions. Yeah, if you guys have any questions afterwards, I'm more than happy to help. So feel free to email me. Ivy posted my email in my in the chat room. So if there are more complicated things you guys want to learn, I think Ivy and I are talking about possibly hosting a more difficult Photoshop class, and those things will just require more detail, more time, and stuff like that. But if you guys have any questions or you need to like figure out something really quick, just feel free to email me. And that's it. Ivy?
Maggie, thank you so much for doing this class. It was awesome. Yeah, we're gonna try to have more classes this summer. We just have to figure out Maggie's schedule, and hopefully we'll all be going back to work soon. So anyway, so it's going to be recorded. I just need a couple days to edit it, and then I can send it to you guys. But again, Maggie's email is in the chat. And if you didn't get it, just email me, and enjoy the rest of your guys' day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.